All right. So good evening, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all at this celebration for the 2025 Erna Hamburger Prize. We'll just start the ceremony with a small video, which tells a little bit the story about the prize and the WISH Foundation.
Supported by the EPFL-WISH Foundation and its members, it has stood as a beacon for women at the forefront of science, technology, and innovation. For 2 decades, it has celebrated the courage to ask bold questions, the brilliance to find answers, and the vision to shape the future. Over the years, the prize has honored pioneers whose work has transformed entire fields. In 2007, Christian Nuslin Volhard, already a Nobel laureate, was recognized for her groundbreaking discoveries in genetics. In 2008, Frances Allen, a legend of computer science and the first woman to ever win the Turing Award, was celebrated for reshaping the way we program machines. In 2009, architect Kazuyo Sejima challenged the way we think about space and design. In 2011, Laureate Ada Yonath was honored for her pioneering research in biology and crystallography. And in 2021, Sarah Gilbert became a global name for her work on vaccine development during the COVID-19 pandemic. Each name tells a story of perseverance and excellence. Together, they form a living archive of women who changed the world and who continue to inspire the next generation. From 2006 to 2024, the Erna Hamburger Prize has honored the most influential women in science from various countries across the globe. The laureates come from the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, Australia, Spain, Japan, and many other nations, reflecting a diverse international recognition of excellence in science. The fields they represent are as diverse as their origins: physics, computer science, material science, architecture, economics, engineering, neuroscience. The prize shows us that women are making history across every domain of human knowledge. But the impact of the award goes even beyond these distinguished laureates. Through its activities, the WISH Foundation has also supported over 100 master's projects. These projects represent a new generation of innovators, students whose ideas and dedication are shaping tomorrow. Their names form a remarkable constellation of talent. Each project tells a story of curiosity and determination, proof that the spirit of the Erna Hamburger Prize extends well beyond a single award. But the story of the prize is also connected to the efforts of the many WISH Foundation members who are leading today. Sabine Söstrong, president of the Swiss Science Council and dean of the IC faculty, has led pioneering research in computational imaging while championing scientific policy at the highest level. Ana Foncuberta y Murral, president of EPFL, brings vision and leadership to one of the world's most innovative universities, guiding its mission at the crossroads of science, technology, and society. Luisa Lambertini, former president of the WISH Foundation and now rector of the USI, championed initiatives to advance women's careers in research through strategic leadership and private partnerships. Karen Scrivener, professor at EPFL and founding figure of the WISH Foundation, is internationally renowned for her pioneering research in sustainable construction materials. And of course, many others, from academia to industry, continue to build exceptional careers that shine as examples of excellence, courage, and dedication. For 20 years, the Erna Hamburger Prize has been more than an award. It is a platform, a celebration, and a promise to recognize women whose ideas shape our future and to inspire those who will follow in their footsteps. As we celebrate this 20th anniversary, we honor the past, we celebrate the present, and of course, we look forward to the discoveries yet to come. And today, we write a new chapter with Rose Mutiso, our 2025 laureate, whose achievements reminds us that the journey of excellence is never ending. Welcome to the Erna Hamburger Prize, 20 years of excellence and a journey that still continues.
So to introduce the ceremony also on behalf of the presidency, tonight we have the pleasure to have Françoise Bommensatt, who was also a former member of the WISH Foundation.
Thank you. It's Mrs. the President of the Swiss Council of Science, de Sabine, Mr. Former President of EPFL, de Jean-Claude, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests, it's an honor for me to join you tonight for this celebration, and I'm really happy to share this time with you. We've seen in the video since 2006 the Erna Hamburger Prize distinguished influential leading women scientists who are transforming their field and executing change. This prize tonight is awarded by the WISH Foundation, and the world needs science, and science needs women. So we are going to change the world, I'm convinced. So, and I'm happy to be with you tonight to celebrate this award to Mrs. Mutiso, a Kenyan scientist in material science and engineering. I'm sure she will inspire you definitively with her presentation in energy transition, and she will explain to you her career path and inspire you definitively in this field. I'm sorry, it is very impressive, I have to admit, to stand here in front of you. So my words of recognition and contribution to the science goes definitively to you in the name of the direction of EPFL, and especially from Anna I'm representing tonight. Giulia, the Vice President of the WISH Foundation, will tell you more about the activities of the WISH Foundation, and Ginevra will definitively show you and introduce you to Mrs. Mutiso career path. So I wish you a very nice evening tonight with us and enjoy this wonderful time. Thank you.
Thank you, Françoise. And before I share a few words with you about the WISH Foundation, I want to drive your attention on this QR code. After the presentation of Dr. Mutiso, we will have a Q&A session. And so you can now download the app, and you can post your questions. You can also like questions that others have posted. And so the most voted questions will then be asked first, and then we will go according to time and interest, and we then can continue on the apro. So I'll give you 2 more seconds to take a picture of the QR code. It will come back up also later on at the end of the presentation, but you can post your question already during the talk. So before we move on with the actual presentation, we just wanted to share a couple of words with you in case you're not familiar with the activities and the history of the WISH Foundation, particularly because this year is a very special year. It's our 20th anniversary, the same for this prize. And so it's kind of a moment for us to celebrate and reflect with you on this journey that indeed started in 2006 by the vision of Professor Karen Scrivener and Ines Lamounière. They were professors here at EPFL, feeling some loneliness in their surrounding, and so they thought, what can we do actually to promote more females in the scientific careers and to reach actual leadership positions? Because as we know today still, we have more and more students coming in our universities, female students, but then the percentage drops as the position becomes more towards leadership position. And so this is really where we need to act. We need to make them supported and provide them concrete tools to feel confident to pursue leadership careers in science and humanities. So this is what the WISH stands for, Women in Science and Humanities. And so we have a number of activities. Tonight is the Erna Hamburger Prize that tries to give a very prominent example of scientific accomplished women accomplished in science and humanities, but we also try to support them through master fellowships to pursue their career abroad. And so the foundation works entirely on volunteering. So here you can see the current members of the board and the Master Project Evaluation Committee. So it's all based on the time that we and the colleagues dedicate to these activities, and it's all based on free work to try to make a difference. And so, in addition to the Erna Hamburger Prize, as I said, the most important other activity we do is towards the newer generation of scientists and leaders, and this is through the award of Master's Fellowship to carry on the master thesis abroad in a laboratory of their choice. The students have to be excellent, so they have to have top grades for EPFL standards. They also have to have a strong motivation to pursue a career in science, and they have also to have a very compelling project, and why this project abroad will be instrumental for their career. And so we have 2 calls every year, and we award around 5 fellowships in spring and autumn. So here you see the awardee from the last call from autumn 2024, and then we also had a second call in spring 2025, and this is the other 5 students who are now doing their research in various labs in the US, in Japan, as you can see, in Denmark, and all across the world. We try to be active also more locally here at EPFL, organizing some lunches, especially for career development, also strengthening the networking with colleagues that have moved, for example, on to industry. So, for example, if you ever would be interested in participating and sharing your experience with the students, feel free to reach out to us. We are always looking forward to new connections and new opportunities to have these interactions. And finally, as we are here today, we have the Erna Hamburger Prize. This is really to recognize distinguished and influential women researchers, and as you've seen already in the video, there are now 20 years of demonstration that women make a difference in all fields of science, and these are all the awardees that we have welcomed here on campus over these past 20 years. Before you hear more about our 2025 laureates, I obviously have also to thank our sponsors. As we said, this is a foundation, is independent of EPFL. We're not directly funded by EPFL, so we accept support from various external and private donors, other foundations, and obviously EPFL also give us some support through the Mediacom or the Equality Office. And if you know or if you want to support us, our activities, again, feel free to reach out to us. So now, in the spirit of the Erna Hamburger Prize that wants not only to recognize accomplished researchers, but also wants to create a connection between generations, we will have the introduction of the speaker by Ginevra Larroux, who is a master's student in our energy program here at EPFL. And so she will tell you more about the speaker and introduce her for her talk. Ginevra, all yours.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am truly honored to be here tonight to present this year's laureate, Dr. Rose Mutiso, recipient of the WISH Foundation Erna Hamburger Prize 2025. The award is given to outstanding, influential women scientists who are transforming their fields and driving change. This year's 20th edition, for the first time, recognizes not only exceptional academic contributions, but also social engagement and thought leadership. I want to thank our institution for taking this stand and for giving students the opportunity to speak here in their role as contributors to future making. My name is Ginevra. I graduated with a Master in Energy Science and Technology here at EPFL a couple of days ago, and I'm just embarked on a PhD journey. My special trait is to be annoyingly questioning. Hard to summarize in one sentence, Dr. Rose is a Kenyan scientist, social entrepreneur, and a powerful advocate for equitable energy access in the global south. Although her long list of accomplishments speaks for itself, I would like to introduce Dr. Rose with a more personal touch, not because my individual judgment matters, but as someone whose short life experience was quite different, born in a different part of the world, raised within different social structures and opportunities, and therefore likely shaped by a different sense of urgency, both in what causes move me and in how strongly I feel compelled to act on them. Yet her work and her stances resonate with me deeply, not only in the form of professional admiration. And I think this suggests her vision speaks to something that matters to all of us. As a student of energy of the 2000s, I learned about the renewable technologies and how to efficiently manage the electrical grid to meet the SDGs. But I also became aware of how crucial this sector is in serving a higher or less technical purpose, rethinking the way we live. In fact, energy is the backbone of our societies, and its cheap, abundant, and reliable access, or the lack thereof in the past, has shaped our economies, provisional systems, even our behaviors, and perhaps more than any other factor. As a young researcher, I had to pledge my loyalty to innovation, which at its very core is about observing and questioning, validating or challenging the state of the art, always building on what is good. And when I stop caring about my simulations continuously crashing for a moment and look around, I observe a world where the very systems that have arguably worked so far, improving some indicators like GDP, life expectancy, access to clean water and sanitation, and so on, even at the global level, are exposing their fragilities and limitations. We consume natural resources faster than they can regenerate in both materials and energy terms, and the benefits and burdens of these human-made activities are distributed unevenly across space and time, between and within countries. Not to forget the elephant in the room that wealth and growth have not necessarily led to well-being and prosperity. At the same time, I can help but hear a vibrant community across academia, industry, and civil society, eager to be empowered, reminding us that an extraordinary abundance of solutions already exists for living well with prosperous standards for all and within planetary boundaries. And yet, this collective energy seems somehow suspended, still in its potential form, not kinetic, if you know what I mean. Well, this is where Dr. Rose Mutiso stands out as a true leader and protagonist in this effort of bridging the gap, standing as an example of science in the service of society, and in particular of global equity and sustainability. Indeed, her journey began in the world of STEM, with a BA and BE in engineering sciences at Dartmouth College and a PhD in materials sciences and engineering at the University of Pennsylvania, with a thesis focused on applications in nanotechnology. After publishing extensively in her field of polymer physics, she soon moved to a different front line, venturing into the public sector, an experience she later described as a watershed, one that even made her state half-jokingly make public service great again. She served as an Energy and Innovation Policy Fellow in the office of US Senator Coons, co-authoring pieces of legislation later signed into law by President Obama. She then became a senior fellow in the Office of International Climate and Clean Energy at the US Department of Energy, where she co-led work on technology and policy dimensions of energy access in the sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. This experience laid the foundation for her next chapter in social entrepreneurship, where she dedicated herself to building and leading institutions that empower and connect people. She co-founded and served as CEO of the Nairobi-based nonprofit Masao Institute, which supports early career African women scientists through doctoral research funding and professional development. She was also research director at the global think tank Energy for Growth Hub, where she co-led work on energy transitions and emerging technologies in Africa and other energy-poor regions. Most recently, she founded and now directs the African Tech Futures Lab, a global network of African thinkers helping decision-makers across the continent navigate emerging science and technology in energy, climate, AI, and digital systems. Across all these diverse roles, one leitmotif stands out: a near-religious devotion to understanding the heart of the issues, and with ambitious and pragmatic vision, turning knowledge into just action. And with this, an enduring awareness that transformative change can only be realized as a communal, shared project where all voices are represented and empowered to be protagonists. I will now let you be inspired by Dr. Rose and mention here a few concepts that struck me while reading her Substack Kibao and listening to her TED Talks. Ideas that entered the puzzle of my confused young thoughts and helped me connect some dots. Empathy to envision, participation to energize and be energized, and the courage to embrace complexity. It is with great enthusiasm that I invite you to welcome Dr. Rose Mutiso with a big round of applause.
Hello, can you hear me? Ginevra, that was, I think, the best introduction I've ever received. So I think let's make a deal. When you win the Erna Hamburger Prize, I'll pay you back with an introduction. So we have many witnesses to this deal. That was beautiful. I really appreciate that. And thank you for the thoughtfulness. It seems that you spent a lot of time reading my work to come up with that, and I really appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. I'm so touched by the attendance here. When I walked into this room, I thought that Switzerland is a small country, but you have very big auditoriums. I don't know what to say. I think I'm, for once, quite speechless. To see my face and my name alongside those images is quite overwhelming. Maybe this will inspire somebody to... Oh, sorry. Is that better now? Sorry, yes. I'm completely humbled to see my name alongside all these luminaries. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. So good evening, everyone. And I'd like to start by thanking the EPFL Women in Science and Humanities Foundation for this incredible honor. Oh my goodness. I'm so humbled to join the distinguished legacy of women scientists and engineers recognized by the Erna Hamburger Award, all of whom are women who, like Erna Hamburger herself, have pushed boundaries to drive societal progress. Thank you to the committee for selecting me. I don't know how you found me, but I'm so glad you did. Thank you to all of the leadership from EPFL who are here today. I'm so honored to have you here to celebrate with me. Thank you very much. Thank you to the EPFL community for the warm welcome to your beautiful campus. Historically, my favorite campus in the world is the University of Cape Town, which is very beautiful. It's cut into a mountainside, but this campus is competing. It's competing in beauty. It's hard to compete. So thank you for welcoming me today. I've spent my day, all day, I've been meeting research groups in different labs, and I feel so energized. The work done here is truly inspiring, and I'm very thankful to everyone for sharing your time, for hosting me so well. Thank you. I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the many people and organizations who've shared their time, their resources, their care, and attention along this journey. This prize is truly a tribute to that collective generosity. Thank you. I'd also like to thank my dear family who are spread across Africa, the US, and the UK for their endless support and love throughout the years. Very special thank you to my wonderful husband, Charles, and our son, Mutua. They're here with me during the weekend, and they left. But they are my greatest sources of joy, inspiration, and encouragement. All right, so now time for business. So my talk today, let's see, maybe I can. Yes, so that's my talk title. So when I first trained as a material scientist, my world was about precision, equations, simulations, measurements, even the simulations that crash all the time. That was my solace, that was my world. For some reason, I decided to move into the messy human world of policy and development. And that shift from the lab to the real world, was my way of reckoning with a question that every scientist must face. What is science for? I'm sure we've all asked that. Maybe sometimes when you're in the lab and your equipment isn't working, or when you're stressed and you've put in an application, or when you wonder how this research paper is adding up to any collective good, we often ask ourselves, what is science for? Coming from Africa, a continent of both immense potential and stark challenges, this question has always felt really urgent and powerful to me. Sometimes when you're in a very poor country, you have a lot of challenges. Science, especially cutting-edge science, can seem like a luxury. What is science for? So that's what I want to explore with you this evening. How can science and technology truly serve people? Even the really out there cutting-edge technology, how can it serve people, and especially those most left behind? Before I get into it, because this is a mixed audience, I don't know how many of you are as familiar with Africa or this work, I'll just start with a straw poll. I put all the questions here, so because I'm going to ask you to, it's going to be very unofficial, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. So how many of you here would describe yourselves as optimistic about Africa's future? Wow, okay, this is exciting. How many are pessimistic? Interesting. And how many, if you're honest, don't really think about Africa at all? Okay, that's okay. So the last group is who I thought would be in the majority. So this is a huge shock for me, but encouraging. So not many people think about Africa, but let me show you what happens when people do think about Africa. Just a few months ago, the nonprofit Africa No Filter was working with UK and US researchers, asked over 1,000 participants in the UK and the US to share the first things that come to their mind when they thought of Africa. Almost 58% of responses were about animals and nature, meaning the majority of thoughts about Africa contained no reference at all to humans, human culture, society, civilization. Compare that with Europe. So when you ask people in these countries, tell me the first 3-5 things that come to mind when you think about Africa. A small caveat is I'm from Kenya, which is obviously renowned for its natural beauty. So this is not to say that you shouldn't come to look at our beautiful nature and animals. But we do have more than that. Okay. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, that's spoiler. Okay. In fact, a quarter of respondents listed only wildlife and landscapes and no other category of thoughts. So a quarter of the respondents really could only come up with thoughts about nature and wildlife when they thought about Africa. Nearly 44% of the thoughts described negative attributes. And even more striking, 75 participants listed at least one negative thought about Africa compared to just 13%. So the negative valence for Africa is much larger than for Europe. And these negative stereotypes cluster into 3 themes: that it's a place full of hostile, uninhabitable environments, that there are so many societal challenges, poverty, disease, corruption, conflict, and maybe this is driving the pessimism, and a perceived lack of rich culture and advanced civilization. So as an African person, this is thoroughly depressing, but it's also not surprising, right? So what is the solution to Africa's persistent perception problem? How do we change this? Well, perhaps we could try Hollywood. That'll fix our perception. So the 2018 Black film Black Panther is perhaps one of the most famous examples of Afrofuturism. This is a cultural movement that blends African myth, art, and science fiction to reimagine Black and African futures. Black Panther's Wakanda was never colonized, its people were wealthy and technologically advanced, and its culture radiated confidence. So I was one of the many people who went to the cinemas to watch this film. I am not a science fiction fan, but I went because it was exciting to see this portrayal of Africa and Africans. Afrofuturism gives us a way to counter damaging stereotypes and instill African pride. Some people dismiss this as escapism, but I argue that these narratives do something important. They expand what we believe is important. They expand what we believe is possible, right? And imagination matters. perhaps more than we realize in technical fields. Every time we set up a new laboratory experiment or model a future energy system or try to find new use cases for technologies, we're engaged in informed speculation about the future. But here's the problem. When it comes to Africa and development, we often get stuck between two failed modes of imagination. Either, So either we see only the problems, the poverty, the dysfunction, the gaps, and project incrementally from that baseline. So Africa is poor today, and your imagination is constrained by the reality today. You can't see beyond that. It's very incremental, and I call this unambitious hyper-incrementalism. Or we treat Africa as a blank canvas for radical technological experiments, unconstrained by the realities on the ground. And I call this radical techno-optimism. Imagination is not enough, and no number of Black Panther sequels can change the material conditions that many African people face. So the question becomes, how do we channel that imaginative ambition into solutions that actually work? I believe profoundly in the power of science and technology to improve human life, and I believe in Africa's potential to harness that power. My work for the past decade in energy, climate, and innovation policy has been about doing exactly that. Some of the biggest challenges I've tackled are areas where technology should have enormous impact. So I've worked on energy poverty. Right now in Africa, 600 million Africans lack access to electricity. So this is completely living in the dark. And countries can't power productive economies due to chronically unreliable power and expensive power. Climate vulnerability is another issue I've worked on and continue to work on. So Africa has contributed only 3% of global emissions, but faces some of the worst impacts, so the most vulnerable region in the world. And the digital divide, nearly 2/3 of Africans are still online. Even as the world races into a new frontier with AI, 2/3 of Africans are completely offline, sorry. So my mission was to harness technology to solve problems in Africa, and this has been the focus of my work in these three areas: energy poverty, climate vulnerability, and the digital divide. Somehow, over time, however, my mission evolved into something unexpected: tempering expectations. If you've watched my TED Talks or if you read my work, often I find myself reluctantly trying to calm people down, From questioning quick fix energy solutions to pushing back on inflated AI narratives, I've become a reluctant tech skeptic. Not because I doubt technology's power to solve problems, because I've seen what happens when it's treated as a silver bullet. And nowhere has that overconfidence been more visible than in one seductive idea: technological leapfrogging. How many in this room are familiar with the concept of leapfrogging technology? Okay, good. This is quite a dominant paradigm within development, the development sector in Africa and in other poor regions. So leapfrogging is the idea that developing countries can skip traditional development stages or bypass incumbent technologies and adopt new approaches. Mobile phones are the canonical leapfrogging story. So you've maybe heard about Africa's rapid mobile adoption in the mid-90s to the 2000s. So Africa went from no landlines to mobile phones. And so that's a really kind of canonical example of bypassing legacy infrastructure. So we didn't have to build the telephone lines. We didn't have to build all that infrastructure. We went straight. So as you can see here in this chart, in 2000, the share of mobile phones to total telephones in African countries jumped dramatically, which means people acquired this new technology really rapidly, which was a huge success because it was just a more effective, affordable way to gain access to communication services. So this tech adoption success spawned a new paradigm in development discourse. If we can leapfrog landlines, why not leapfrog the power grid, right? Why not leapfrog other traditional development pathways? We can leapfrog schools and hospitals, So this just became a new way of thinking based on this mobile phone success story. But here's the problem. Too often, these leapfrogging narratives are built on hype. So really a focus on technology as the silver bullet solution. On misdiagnosed problems, sometimes technology can solve problems, but not others. And a reluctance to face hard truths about poverty, infrastructure, and structural inequality, or trying to find shortcuts, because it's hard to accomplish things in difficult contexts, and technology can be a seductive idea. So back to this idea of imagination, it becomes a toxic combination. Not enough imagination about Africa's potential, and too much imagination about what technology can do. So tonight I want to share 5 rules for thinking about leapfrogging more clearly, rules that reject both the defeatism and the hype, and ground us in reality, and leave room for ambition and imagination. I first shared these rules in a piece I recently published in Science, where I explore them in more depth, and I encourage you to read it if you have time. And tonight I'll just walk you through the highlights. So, rule number 1, define and evaluate leapfrogging clearly. So if you are thinking that we can bypass traditional pathways and use technology in new ways in a place like Africa, you have to be very specific about what problem you're solving. So leapfrogging is an amorphous concept that needs specificity to be useful. And indeed, misidentifying leapfrogs leads to bad policy and investment choices. For example, energy leapfrogging, so I've worked on energy for a long time. So energy leapfrogging can be defined in multiple ways. Academic research shows empirical support for aggregate economy-wide leapfrogging. So this chart shows per capita total final energy consumption against GDP per capita. The blue dots circles are OECD countries between 1960 and 1989, and the red ones are non-OECD countries between 2000 and 2016. What it shows is that today's developing countries are actually using less energy at the same income level than richer countries did. And this is an example of economy-wide leapfrogging. So economies today are less energy intensive. That means that the whole economy people are achieving the same income level with less energy input. And this can be thought of an aggregate economy-wide form of energy leapfrogging. But that's different from technology-specific leapfrogging, right? So for example, to go from bypassing fossil generation, a coal plant on the left, in favor of renewables, or building a decentralized energy system instead of traditional grids. So often when it comes to leapfrogging, people actually are often thinking about technology-specific leapfrogs, which is different from other definitions. But sometimes there's a lack of clarity when people are thinking about is leapfrogging not happening? So my colleague Mark Thurber at Stanford, he outlined 3 attributes that have to be met for a technology-specific leapfrog to work. 1, the technology should already be proven in mature markets. Sometimes people try to deploy completely brand new ideas that have not been tested elsewhere in these more kind of challenging contexts, and that can be a real recipe for failure. 2, it must offer better comparable functionality to business as usual. And 3, it should enable workarounds to expensive or obsolete infrastructure. So by that definition, mobile phones were a perfect leapfrog, actually. They met all 3 criteria. And so that's why mobile phones are such an exciting leapfrogging example. But not every innovation meets the test. In the energy space, for example, it's common to hear that because wind and solar are now cheaper than fossil fuels, we should be able to run fully renewable grids. So the truth is more complex. Wind and solar are leapfrogging fossil fuels for low-cost, large-scale electricity generation. So they're already cheaper, meaning they've become the most economical way to add new power capacity in many markets. But their variability brings new challenges, and it creates the need for next-generation leapfrogs, like batteries and storage. And these are still emerging. I was just with Mario today, and I was debating with him not the if, but when these other storage and other technologies would be ready, and he convinced me it's sooner than I thought. So that's why I put the yet. So wind and solar, they are leapfrogged. So now, actually, poor countries can build grids that are really actually have high shares of renewables, this is a possibility that they don't have to build all the coal plants and all the fossil plants that rich countries did. But we're still trying to figure out the grid equation, and those system leapfrogs are still emerging. So this is why it's not accurate to say that, oh, we can just bypass the old way of generating energy. So some of the technology is in the leapfrog zone, and some is not yet, but we're getting there. The second rule of leapfrogging in Africa is to expect the unexpected. So in Africa, the improbable doesn't mean impossible. And African consumers repeatedly embrace and adapt technology in unexpected ways, defying expert expectations. A mix of market pressure, user ingenuity, and sometimes policy orchestration creates conditions for surprising uptake. How many of you have heard of M-Pesa? Yeah, so this is, Pesa is Kiswahili for money, M, the universal abbreviation of mobile money, essentially. So M-Pesa is the mobile money revolution born in Kenya. If you go to Nairobi today, you don't have to use cash. We just send money seamlessly using our mobile phones. This is how we transact. It's one of the easiest places to transact, and it's because of this mobile money revolution. So what's fascinating about M-Pesa is that it succeeded by failing at its original purpose. So M-Pesa was initially developed to help microfinance institutions to manage loan disbursements and repayments. So this was a very specific application it was created for. But the users in that original pilot, they had better ideas. They began using mobile airtime as a form of currency. And this was, this is completely unexpected for the people who created the platform. So users are using it as a form of currency, and they started adapting the platform for a wide range of everyday transactions that the designers never imagined. So suddenly, people are using mobile airtime as currency. They're transacting, they're paying bills, they're moving money around. And this is what created what is now a huge Africa-wide revolution. Today, M-Pesa has over 60 million users a month across several African countries. Another example I like to give, I've been working on this recently, is Ethiopia's sudden electric vehicle revolution. Ethiopia is one of Africa's most populous countries. It's one of our big economies, but it's quite, on a per capita basis, still quite a poor country. It's historically been one of Africa's least motorized countries. So this is in 2016. Ethiopia had 6.7 vehicles by 1,000 people compared to the Africa-wide average of 72. So this is a country with not a lot of vehicles of any category. It's a very, very notable motorization laggard in Africa, given the size of the country. And yet today, Ethiopia now has the region's highest share of electric vehicles, about 8% of vehicles on the road. And actually, our colleague and I are just about to do some new analysis that compares Ethiopia to leaders like EU. It's actually at par almost with the EU in terms of penetration of EVs, obviously from a small baseline. But that's kind of crazy to go from one of the least motorized, well, Africa's least motorized country to Africa's most electrified. If you had told me, so basically a few years ago, Ethiopia became the first country in the world to ban internal combustion engine vehicles, and all the policy experts were like, this is horrible, this is a bad idea. What are you doing? This is crazy. And somehow, Ethiopia has surprised us. So a unique combination of policy incentives, so this is the ICE vehicle ban and generous tax exemptions was a big factor, but also Ethiopia has very unique market pressures. So it has chronic fuel shortages that make fossil fuel vehicles very difficult to use. It has a complicated foreign currency regime. So foreign currency is always fluctuating. It's kind of a complicated monetary policy situation there. Huge vehicle scarcity. So Ethiopia is one of the few countries in the world where used cars appreciate. So when you resell your car, it's worth more than when you bought it. And so because of this, which is crazy because it's extreme scarcity, but because of this weird soup of factors that are so out of this world, this country has just become an optimal place for EV uptake. And also, obviously, there's availability of cheap EVs from China and whatnot. But so I had to kind of, what they say, eat my hat about Ethiopia, because I was like, this is crazy. And it's still, we're still tracking the progress, but it's really making huge strides on electrification. So yes, in Africa, the improbable is possible, but it works best when policy really leaves room for adaptation and user ingenuity. Rule number 3, beware of quick wins that obscure systemic challenges. So much of what counts as innovation in Africa is a decentralized response to persistent dysfunction, and this is what essentially has happened in Ethiopia, for example. Creative workarounds that sidestep broken systems rather than fixing them risk entrenching the very challenges they aim to address. So African users are very creative. They work around the dysfunction and they innovate. And that's something that we should praise. It's very admirable, but sometimes it can entrench the dysfunction. So I'll give the example of distributed solar. So this is grid-connected rooftop or ground-mounted installations. Yep, so Africa is having, actually, maybe this has been covered in the news recently. So there's kind of a silent solar revolution in Africa right now. Across the region, distributed solar rates, adoption rates are rapidly catching up with mature markets such as California and Australia. This is a huge surprise. It's also a surprise because essentially in mature markets, including here and other rich countries, solar adoption is really driven by generous subsidies. This is bottom-up. People and companies are self-financing. So they're cheap imports of solar panels from China. So this is without any subsidy. And actually, this paper, you'll see I wrote with my colleagues, says no subsidies, no problem. So Africans are adopting solar at a kind of a crazy, crazy, crazy rate. But what's interesting is this is an organic response to unreliable or expensive power. So you know, this is, people are responding to the dysfunction in the power sector. South Africa alone saw distributed solar capacity grow from 500 megawatts in 2019 to 5 gigawatts in 2023, a tenfold increase in 4 years. What was happening in South Africa during this period? A crippling power crisis. And so people started to put solar, adopt solar. So distributed solar is providing valuable benefits to African consumers, but it also reflects a deeper power sector failures. And without strategic integration, widespread adoption threatens to further destabilize fragile grids. And it also creates a two-tiered system where the resource actors who can afford to get the solar, they escape to private solutions, and everybody else is stuck with the deteriorating infrastructure. And so this is, I was just recently speaking on the BBC's Climate Question podcast about this, because there's a lot of excitement about all of the solar uptake in Africa, and I'm excited about it, but this is the kind of the asterisk that this rapid uptake can entrench the crisis in the power sector. And so balancing innovation against systemic and structural health and well-being of the entire system is really, really important. Otherwise, you can end up having entrenching inequality and other dysfunction. Number 4 is that you can't leapfrog the basics. Some steps simply cannot be skipped. Too often, leapfrogging rhetoric becomes an excuse to avoid the slow and expensive work of building foundations such as power infrastructure, transportation networks, education systems, and robust public institutions. And nowhere is this more tempting than in Africa, where these basics remain uneven or absent, and where techno-solutionism promises a seductive workaround. But without those foundations, you can't sustain any technological future. If you don't have a skilled workforce, if you don't invest in your public institutions, no amount of technology silver bullets can solve that problem. And so some things have to be done the hard way. AI is one of the topics I write on quite often recently, and it's the latest example of this wishful thinking. Across the continent, governments are unveiling ambitious AI strategies that promise to unlock Africa's AI opportunity. Some analysts claim that Africa could capture 10% of the multi-trillion AI market, with armies of local entrepreneurs revolutionizing everything from agriculture to healthcare. I'm not saying it's impossible for AI to have an impact, but the reality is that if you have no power connectivity, no data infrastructure, limited technical capacity, no data infrastructure, these ambitions won't advance beyond buzzy rhetoric. And so just consider this, while the rest of the world races to build data centers, which are the physical backbone of the new digital economy, Africa accounts for just 1% of global data center capacity. And actually, last night I decided it'd be interesting to compare Switzerland, population 9 million, to Africa, the whole continent, population 1.5 billion people, in terms of data centers. And Switzerland has about 116 data centers. This is just a public data set. It might not be as updated. 230, but these are almost equivalent. But Africa, this is Africa, the whole region, 1.5 billion people versus Switzerland. So this infrastructure backbone is completely missing. And so people are often, they find it seductive that, oh, we'll make an app, it'll solve all these problems, and this is the future. And I believe in technology. I want technology to make a difference. But when I see these kind of infrastructural gaps, and when I see that, most Africans, a big share of Africans don't even have basic electricity access, these are red flags, essentially. So leapfrogging should never be a license to skip the hard stuff. It should be a call to build the foundations that make real technological transformation possible. Final rule, number 5, is to focus on making people less poor. Tech adoption at scale depends not only on innovation, but on affordability and income. Even mobile phones, the poster child of African leapfrogging, they remain out of reach for many. In sub-Saharan Africa, unique mobile subscribers are only 44% of the population, and just 27% use mobile internet. So even if 20 years ago we were in a mobile revolution, majority of Africans still don't have mobile phones, and the vast majority are not on mobile data. So this is a revolution very much still in progress. And the reason is that poverty and low incomes are defining constraint. Mobile data can be the equivalent of 10% of a household's income. And so this is, this makes technologies out of reach, even technologies that we think of as affordable. So just one last data example here. So our analysis, my colleagues and I did some analysis that show vehicle demand is very tightly correlated to income. So the light green bubbles are all poor countries, and the richer you become, basically, the more vehicles you have in your system, right? And so this was interesting because we were doing some research about electric vehicle markets in Africa. And there was a lot of interest in how can we reduce the costs of EVs, and what are the technology-specific ways to make EVs more affordable. And what our analysis showed is that low incomes remain one of the biggest barriers to expanding all vehicle markets on the continent, including next-gen technologies such as EVs. And so this means that addressing EV affordability requires more than lowering EV-specific technology costs. It requires tackling poverty. People just need to have more incomes, and this is how people motorize. And the same applies to energy access, which is a topic I've worked on for many years. So programs often fail not because of technology limitations, but because poor households can't even afford subsidized services. And this is compounded by the fact that there are limited opportunities for productive uses of electricity in very poor regions. So this is a paradox. Poverty constrains the adoption of the very technologies that can reduce poverty. It's like a chicken and an egg. So you need technology to tackle poverty, but poverty limits technology adoption. And it requires us to think strategically about first adoption patterns that maximize impact. And ultimately, sorry, this is what I said, technology can help reduce poverty, but it also constrains technology adoption. And ultimately, the technologies that matter the most to the poor are the ones that create jobs and raise incomes. I'm typically less concerned about whether a person in rural Africa is using the latest technology, whether they have access to AI. That is less interesting than if there's a factory in their village that exists because they're able, so the factory is the one that's leveraging the AI, the factory is the one that's leveraging the energy, and then the person gets a job at that factory, gets an income, and then can start to access technology directly. And so instead of really focusing on individual access, we should be thinking about productive and institutional access that gives people a job that then increases their incomes. So if there's a unifying message behind these 5 rules, it's this. We must shift from shortcut thinking to structural thinking, from the extremes of techno-optimism and techno-pessimism to techno-realism, a balance that neither treats technology as a silver bullet nor dismisses its transformative potential. As Africa confronts new technological frontiers, from AI to biotechnology to next generation energy systems, the stakes of getting this right are higher than ever. The path forward requires clarity and discipline. Define leapfrogging opportunities precisely, create flexibility for unexpected adoption, address systematic failures and make quick fixes seductive. Don't skip the hard work of building resilient foundations, and recognize that poverty alleviation is not just a goal, but an enabler of technological progress. By 2100, 38% of the global population and almost half of the world's youth will be in Africa. And in an important sense then, all futurism is actually Afrofuturism, because there'll be a lot of Africans in the future. So as we imagine Africa's technological future, and indeed our shared human future, let's couple ambition with realism, imagination with evidence, and innovation with inclusion. Thank you.
How do you think the way technological companies can produce producers that treat African markets, for example, offering limited warranties, shifting risks onto users' waste, and restricting repairs, reflect broader problems in technological capitalism and its impact on innovation in Africa? So it's a complex question.
Sorry, do you mind reading that again? Do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, how do you think the way tech companies and producers treat African market? For example, do they offer... So just treat African markets, for example, offering limited warranties, shifting risk onto users' waste, and restricting repairs, reflects broader problems in technological capitalism and its impact on innovation in Africa.
Okay. I asked you to repeat that question because actually that strikes me as a problem, not just in Africa, but all over the world. That technological companies rely on, if you think of your phones and your devices and the ways that you're locked into these dysfunctional use patterns where your batteries say, you need to replace. And I think the EU now has some legislation to fight against that. So I think one thing I try to do in my work is to think about when is a problem specific to Africa and when is a problem a global problem. And I was just talking to Klaus in the Essential Tech Lab, I don't know, Klaus somewhere here, this morning about this idea that the more we recognize problems to be shared across rich and poor countries, and then you can tackle them together. So I think that technology use case, treatment of technology consumers, standards in this domain, I think are challenges shared everywhere. One thing that's really, really interesting in Africa is sometimes the standard setting that happens in the EU flows down. And sometimes it has a positive impact, sometimes negative. But For example, data standards, so EU standards being set at a high level also flow down to Africa, and so those data protections also flow over to African consumers. And so I think recognizing the shared patterns globally removes us from thinking about Africa in isolation and thinking about how can global consumers learn from each other and fight these problematic dynamics together.
So now I thank everybody for liking the short question. So what do NGOs get wrong in Africa?
Short but short but difficult. Well, should I maybe, I think NGOs, oh gosh, man. Some NGOs do really, really important work. It's not all, some get it right. I think a big challenge in Africa is when, this goes back to my fourth rule, when there's a vacuum of public systems and public institutions, sometimes the NGOs fill that vacuum, and that's not often sustainable. So what we've seen recently with the policy U-turn in the US in public health and the withdrawal of a lot of money for public health and for essential medical aid that was channeled through a network of NGOs that delivered ARVs or other, and I have some colleagues who here who work in public health. So that was a huge shock in the system, but one of the things that emerged from that is that the government was absconding on their duties, essentially. So instead of maybe now are having to take on a bit more of those roles. So I think maybe one thing that NGOs need to be mindful of is how much are we removing from the public system and how much are we complementing what's happening in the public system. So often in Africa, we have a vacuum, and if you're over-reliant on non-public institutions to deliver services, then this becomes a long-term problem.
So we are back to the long questions. So is the whole concept of leapfrogging a somewhat neocolonialist view? So the person who is asking see this as a term interpreted in the global north. It is seen as a way to apply technology somewhere else for businesses under the disguise of a philanthropy. Always implying that there is somewhere to leapfrog to, which is the technological state of the global north. But who says that this is the best state? Who says African countries want to be in that exact state? Do you think that leapfrogging in the sense of getting more quickly to the same situation other countries are in right now is desirable?
So I'll just say this. So having hospitals with modern equipment, having lights in your house, refrigerating your produce so that it doesn't go, this is a desirable state for everyone, including in Africa. So I think there's been a little bit of a sometimes romanticizing poverty, right? And it is true that Western countries have, maybe there's overconsumption and less ideal, like Ginevra said, maybe prosperity that is not leading to holistic well-being. But just to be clear, the desired state is for people to live, to be healthy, to live with dignity, and to have access to modern amenities. And so if you're sick, if your child is sick, that they don't die unnecessarily, that they have access to life-saving therapies and equipment, that you have access to education. And so I think that these are all desirable states in my mind. Maybe not the kind of overconsumptive and overexploitive way that the industrialization and development has happened in the past, but maybe we can all agree that this is a good place for human beings to be, to live safely and healthily, and science and technology are an important vector to deliver that dignified life.
And what is maybe the last question? So what is the role of universities in Africa in implementing leapfrogs?
Yeah, so I spent quite a long time working closely with African universities, and I think it's a little bit of a mixed situation. So like many universities, maybe I think EPFL, from the discussions I've had, has a very strong technology transfer setup, and but even in universities all over the world, even the best universities, often translating knowledge and innovations from the lab to the world is a challenge, and African universities are no different. So I worked really closely with people doing really interesting work, but like most academics, the goal was an academic paper. This is not just unique to Africa, these are just kind of the incentives. Many African universities don't have the same infrastructure for tech transfer and partnerships that kind of can help translate in the same way that big technical universities like EPFL does. So I think African academics face a lot of constraints in engaging in making technology real in the world. A lot of academics in Africa have huge teaching loads. They don't have time for research, they don't have money for research. When they do research, it's in this with the academic incentives for that they need to publish to progress. And so I think this is still a challenge, but increasingly there is a trend towards trying to build a bit more of that tech transfer infrastructure, governments are trying to direct some spending. So African governments spend very little on R&D, there just isn't enough money. So this is a very difficult setup, but I just wanted to note that academics all over the world do struggle with innovation, so it's not just unique in Africa.
I was told I can continue, so that's good. So for a Swiss person, to better understand the current status and future potential of African countries, is there a particular book you would recommend?
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. This is a very good question. Well, maybe actually now that we're okay, let me think about this. So it's difficult for me to give. I'm almost like this question is almost like push. I don't want to recommend like a textbook that gives you kind of development policy 101, Africa history 101. So I'll go a bit off whatever and recommend. So there's one book by a Nigerian American philosopher called Africa Must Be Modern, which is a very interesting book, which speaks to the question that was asked earlier, like what does it mean for Africans to engage with this idea of modernity that is kind of created elsewhere. So I think that's a really interesting question. I think there are a lot of questions that are more about the nuts and bolts of African colonial legacy and history and policy and development, and that's a very large literature, but maybe this is start with a little bit of philosophical book and then build from there.
So with the ongoing rise in global temperatures, do you believe that climate warming could act as a catalyst for accelerating an adaptation and investment in renewable energy across Africa? In what ways might this shift present both opportunities and challenges for the continent's energy future?
Yeah, so this is, I didn't cover this in my talk today, but for a long time, a big focus of my work has been climate and development, and whether there's a tension between development and climate. So it's something I used to think about. It's a good question. So African countries are, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, and if you take out South Africa, which is the largest energy, it's a big coal economy. So South Africa is the only coal economy that we have in big one in sub-Saharan Africa. But the rest of Africa consumes such little energy, contributes almost nothing to emissions. So this is Africa's contribution to emissions historically, currently, and into the near future is very negligible. And so the motivation for African countries is not to mitigate against emissions, but to build resilience. And energy is important because energy is really important for resilience. If you're having droughts, you need energy to irrigate. If it's very hot, you need air conditioning and cooling or fans. And so from Africa, we are often thinking about climate and energy from a resilience perspective, not from a mitigation perspective, because the mitigation contribution is very minor. So from that perspective, African countries are trying to really build up energy systems that can help them be more resilient against climate impacts. African countries have huge renewable endowments, so renewable energy makes sense, but I think that there are still questions, and this was my leapfrogging point about to what extent, with the current state of technologies, African countries can build highly renewable grids. It also depends on what your endowment is. In Kenya, we have an extremely green grid because we have a lot of hydro, we have geothermal, so 90% of our electricity is already renewable. But if you're South Africa, you have a 90% coal grid. So each country is in a different situation. But overall, the message for many African countries is we need to adapt to the changing climate, and energy is essential to build the infrastructure that helps us adapt.
So then it comes a question from the EPFL community. So what role can academic institutions like EPFL can play to contribute to the meaningful societal impact? Yeah.
So today I had some really, really great meetings with many members of the APFL community that are collaborating with African counterparts. I found that really, just really, really inspiring. And so I think there are programs like EFAX, and I met and different other teams where EPFL researchers are paired with African academics, or where African researchers, I met some who are at EPFL to use the facilities and do some a few months of training or research. And so I think that peer-to-peer collaborations, especially between African scientists and engineers here, are really critical because like you said in the beginning about how EPFL-WISH Foundation came out of this sense of loneliness among the women scientists, I think that being an African researcher or academic can be quite lonely. It's very difficult. You're working under very difficult circumstances. You don't have facilities, you don't have equipment. It's very constrained. And so the ability to enter a partnership with an EPFL researcher, to collaborate, to have access to the know-how, to the equipment, to be able to collaborate as scientists is huge. And so I'm really impressed by that activity that's already happening, and I hope that more and more happens. And so I think that's, for me, one of the biggest ways that EPFL is contributing. It's just quite remarkable how many, I was surprised by the sheer number of Africans at EPFL. I wasn't sure how many I'd find, and it just seems that there's a tradition of African researchers collaborating with EPFL researchers, and I think that's great, and I hope to see that work grow.
So how do you think politicians and business owners in Africa can help build the energy transitions without losing control and ownership through investments based on debt coming from countries like China?
Very good question. So often Africans, we like to blame everybody else, but I'll take a second to blame. Our leaders and politicians are a big part of the problem. So I would say the first step is that they should be less corrupt. I think the political incentives can be quite warped. This happens everywhere, not just in Africa, but I think the first thing that we need is more accountability from our leadership. In Kenya, I'll just give a short example. So several years ago, the Kenyan government tried to build a coal plant in Lamu. Lamu is a historical port town on the Indian Ocean coast. It's a city where no cars are. It's a town. It's an area which is very preserved in its original state. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the government wanted to build a coal plant there with Chinese backing. Kenya is a country that has vast geothermal, solar, wind. There was just no reason for it. And it just, in the end, there was just a lot of shenanigans with the government trying to cut big infrastructure deals. And civil society really, they took the government to court. And that coal plant was canceled. Actually, part of that litigation was energy modelers were a big part of that litigation because they were demonstrating that the Kenyan power system did not need this asset in this location or just in general. And so there's a lot of collaboration between experts and advocates. And so I think that a big need is for citizens to hold the governments to account, because the political class have completely different incentives in a place like Africa. And the deals that they're entering are often there are other kind of, not just the stated aims. So I think for me, I would turn that question around, not from the leadership who actually, African leaders know what to do. Like in Kenya, our leadership is quite sophisticated and educated. They know what to do, but they often choose to act otherwise because they have different political incentives. And so what I would like to see is more citizens holding government to account, more collaborations like what I described, where technical energy modelers collaborated with advocates to take this litigation to court and to hold the government to account.
So thank you. There is also opportunity to ask Rose questions during the apéro, so you are all welcome to approach her, and if your question was not selected, you can do so, because we need to move with the ceremony, and part of the ceremony is also to award Rose Mutiso with Erna Hamburger 2025 award. So let's thank her again for a really inspiring talk. Award, and this award is given in recognition for your visionary leadership in promoting equitable energy processes, access, and commitment to centering African voices in global science and policy for sustainable solutions to the world's most pressing challenges.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So we have also adopted some small changes. So instead of flowers, we are now giving Lego sets because our awardees travel. So this is one of the things. And another thing is like this Lego flower is a Japanese maple tree. A Japanese maple tree also symbolizes a change. So symbolizes maybe as well this optimistic, realistic change for Africa. And I know you have also 3-year-old, and maybe you will also play with this.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I'll let you know how long it takes me to build it. Hopefully, it might put my engineering skills to the test. Thank you.
This is a standard EPFL starter kit, but inside are also like a Swiss chocolate. Not all EPFL starter kit comes with a Swiss chocolate. And also a nice pen, so just writing is a still important skill to have. So,
thank you so much. This is wonderful.
In technology-driven world.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
You're all welcome to join us for an apéro that is just below.